I had to realize that I wanted to partner like with my body. I didn't want to fight the PCOS. I needed to realize that PCOS was a message my body was sort of sending to me that there were things that were out of balance in my life. And at the time when I was really struggling, there were, my emotional health, my physical health, my spiritual health, all of that was sort of out of balance. And PCOS was just a wake up call. And it wasn't really anything to fight against. It was something to work with in order to bring things back into balance and to sort of embrace my feminine side. And that's when the healing came in.
Hello and welcome to the PCOS Oracle podcast, Amy. It's an honor to have you on. I've been following your work for many years now, and the amount of awareness you have raised and the number of women with PCOS you have inspired and empowered is incredible. So I want to take a minute to say thank you for all that you have done and continue to do. So like I said, I'm super excited to speak to you and delve into our interview today. And I'm sure our listeners will learn a lot from what you have to say and what you're going to share. Now, I'm pretty sure our listeners know who you are already, but for those who don't, can you please share your PCOS journey, your story, and how PCOS Diva came about?
Oh, well, thank you for such a nice intro. So I'm Amy Medling. I'm the founder of PCOS Diva, and PCOS Diva is a website. It started as a blog back in 2009 when I was really looking to connect and find some community online, because at the time I had been diagnosed with PCOS a few years back. It wasn't until I was 31 that I was diagnosed, after years of not really knowing what was wrong with me. I think that, like many women, we find that we're faced with PCOS symptoms in puberty, from hair loss to hair growth to anxiety and irregular cycles, acne. I really, you name it, I had it as a teen and young adult. And when I finally got the diagnosis when I was 31, I was trying to get pregnant again with my second son. I was able to get pregnant with just around a Clomid with my first child. But with the second one, I suffered quite a bit of secondary infertility, which I think is quite common for a lot of women with PCOS. And after I finally did get pregnant with that son, doctors wanted me to go back on metformin and the birth control pill, and I tried to for a little while, but those prescriptions made me feel worse than ever. It was very hard for me to come back on the pill and metformin. So at that time, I was about 32. I had a 3-year-old and a baby, and I remember feeling way too young to feel so old. And I hear that from a lot of women, and sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And I knew that I could not live the rest of my life feeling this way. Unfortunately, that was the only therapy that doctors could offer me at the time. So I spent a lot of time reading books, medical textbooks, because at the time there weren't really that many PCOS resources out there. So my husband started encouraging me to sort of share what I was learning along the way as a creative outlet. I was a stay-at-home mom with these 2 little boys, but as I was implementing new habits into my life, I started feeling better. I was more vibrant. I didn't have the brain fog. The acne started to disappear, and it was really lifestyle modifications that was making the most difference. So in 2019, I started blogging when I didn't really know what a blog was. And here we are 10 years later. And, I still love what I do, sharing the knowledge that I've gained to help other women manage their PCOS symptoms and be able to thrive with PCOS, because I think that that's truly a possibility.
I totally agree, and I think everyone can, all of our listeners, and I can relate with your PCOS story and your journey. I feel like all of us experience those symptoms, and we go to the doctor, and the standard advice, which is, lose weight, cut carbs, go on the birth control pill, or some like metformin or another kind of medication, and it's always the same. And I'm sure, back then when you were diagnosed, there was, like you said, very, if any, like PCOS resources compared to now, which people are like really lucky to have, a lot more. There's blogs and more doctors who are now looking at the alternative kind of side of not just, medication and pills, but, looking at diet. How can we get to the root cause, which I'm sure we'll delve into a little bit later on, but getting to the root cause and using like supplements and all this alternative kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like it's great that you documented from 2009 like all the way up to like 2020 to like have all this knowledge just becoming even more and greater. It's incredible. And I like the fact that when you said pieces of women want to be able to thrive, because obviously with those symptoms like fatigue and all that stuff, you just feel, and like the lack of confidence and self-esteem, it's just no way to live. And you just feel like when you've been diagnosed, you feel like there's no way out. You just feel like this is it. This is what my life's going to be like. And it can be really, depressing and sad. But to be able to have resources like this and like now new information, more awareness around PCOS and people saying it's possible, you get that, positivity, and you just get more excited that, there is a way out. I'm not a victim of PCOS, yes, of my condition. I can thrive and live the way I want to and the way I deserve to. So it's great. I really, it's amazing. So how did you discover you had PCOS? Who did you go to? What kind of doctor? Because this is like a question that I always get asked, like, who do I actually go to? Because there's the endocrinologist, the gynecologist, or general practitioner, all these doctors. And then like, how did you get to your root cause? What kind of tests did you do to discover that root cause so you can make those changes?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I just want to say you're absolutely right. There's so much hope for women with PCOS. And if you're listening and you can really relate, and the idea of being sick and tired resonates, there is so much hope. So know that. But I think it's really important for women to track their cycles. And, whether you're using, some type of app, or you're using a fertility tracker, like one of my favorites is the OvuSense fertility monitor. But at the time, tracking, this was back when like I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was using the Crichton model of family planning. And this is back before iPhones. I'm dating myself. I'm going to be 49 this year. So this was quite a long time ago. But we actually tracked using just a paper chart and these little stickers with babies on them with different colors. And depending on, what your cervical mucus looked like that day, you'd put a certain color baby on the chart. And that was a real powerful tool for me to realize that my cycles were just not quite right. And I understood that I wasn't ovulating based on doing that charting, where before I really had no clue what was going on. But I was able to take that data to the nurse practitioner that was teaching the method. And she actually looked at my chart, and she also could tell I wasn't having any like mucus that was ovulatory at all. And she said, has anybody ever told you that you may have PCOS? Well, I had read about PCOS and I kind of put it in the back of my mind. This was before I knew that I had PCOS, because I was still trying to research and figure out what was going on. And so I was familiar with the term. And she said, I think that you need to go to a reproductive endocrinologist to get checked and to have that vaginal ultrasound. So she really led me to the reproductive endocrinologist, who then tested my androgen hormones. She did the vaginal ultrasound that showed that string of pearls on my ovaries. And I also had the inovulatory cycles because I was trying to get pregnant and that wasn't happening. And combined with that and, my charting, I met all three of the criteria of the Rotterdam criteria. So I finally got that diagnosis at 31. But it was really the charting and tracking my cycles that led me to getting that diagnosis. That's what I attribute it to.
Interesting. Obviously now with the whole new technology, everyone's like finding it a lot easier.
Yes, it's a lot easier.
But so what was your root cause? Like, was it insulin resistant related, or was it high cortisol, adrenal?
That's a good question. Back then, I know that I had some pretty bad insulin resistance because I ended up working with a naturopath doctor, and she had me tracking my blood sugar with a glucometer because I was just tanking out after lunch. And so we tracked my blood sugar, and it showed that although, my labs were all normal, when I was eating something really high carbohydrate, like pizza, I would have the pizza and my blood sugar would go up, but it wouldn't go up that much. But then afterwards, it would just crash and would get about 30 points lower, which would cause me to feel very tired and crave sugar again to kind of continue that cycle. So I do think that there was some insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance there. And as I went on and changed my diet, my insulin sensitivity increased. And now I don't really have that, any issue with insulin resistance. So you can definitely heal. That's another message. Just because you're experiencing that insulin resistance now doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way. But after doing research over the years and reading books by like Dr. Fiona McCullough, I don't know if you're familiar with her book, 8 Steps to Reverse Your PCOS. And I learned about androgen-driven adrenal kind of type of PCOS. I really think that is something that I deal with. If I went off my diet, I would definitely gain weight, but I don't. I think I'm more of that thin PCOS type, and so that androgen sort of adrenal excess PCOS is often goes with thin PCOS, I've found. I also love Dr. Laura Bryden's book. She wrote the Period Repair Manual. And she talks about different types of PCOS. And I often wonder if like in terms of what triggered my PCOS as a teen, whether it was inflammation, because I ate a lot of gluten and dairy. I didn't eat a lot of vegetables back then, and I think I had a lot of inflammation. So it's hard to say, but I can kind of resonate with all three of those causes, I guess, root causes of PCOS.
Yeah, I like, when you mentioned how your labs were normal, but when you would eat certain foods, which is a good indicator, when you eat a meal, it's always good to pay attention to how your body reacts to that food, and how you feel mentally. So that's always a good kind of thing to do, to see how, if you do suffer from insulin resistance, is to see how your body reacts after eating food. But I think having a glucometer is to just get more precise, for sure. It's good to have one of those, but then obviously go to the doctor to get a fasting glucose test and all the necessary stuff to, if you've got a list of insulin resistant symptoms and you're experiencing these kind of things, then you would have to go get those formal tests to get the diagnosis. But I think that's a good indicator. And yeah, that's interesting. It's always good now that we're always delving in deeper to find out what are actual root causes and the trigger, because obviously now research is saying PCOS is genetic. So and obviously our environment and maybe, you know, the stresses or the foods we are eating, which can be stresses on the body, kind of trigger the gene to switch on and us to the symptoms to exacerbate. So it's interesting now that the research is becoming, you know, people are you know, delving more into this stuff, and we're just discovering it. It's really interesting to and motivating for us to, you know that we can essentially turn off the PCOS gene and live a symptom-free life. So it's really interesting.
Well, and I definitely, there is a genetic component. My mother has PCOS. My sister does, and I venture to say that both my maternal and paternal grandmothers both did. They both had fertility issues. They, you know, both had thin hair and facial hair, and you know, had issues with insulin resistance. And I have a daughter, and she's 11. You know, right now, so far so good. But we talk a lot about the importance of eating healthy foods and you know, making sure that she gets exercise and good sleep, because as you said, those are all things that can kind of turn off the triggers and the, you know, the epigenetics of PCOS.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like you mentioned, how you think you have more of that lean PCOS, the thin PCOS. So obviously there's that myth going around, like you have to be overweight or obese to have PCOS, when in reality, you know, a percentage of women actually are lean and are not overweight, and they suffer from insulin resistance or adrenal as well. So it's important for women to know that, and not, you know, because that's the reason why a lot of women with PCOS go undiagnosed, because doctors have that stereotypical image that the woman with PCOS has to be overweight. So it's like a disservice to, you know, lean PCOS women who go there for looking for, you know, that support and to get to that, you know, find out what's causing their symptoms, and they kind of get brushed away because, like, you don't meet this, you know, symptom that's not even it's like we don't all share the same symptoms. So, you know, it's quite frustrating for with the PCOS community to not to have that stereotypical image. But hopefully as time goes by, you won't have, you know, those beliefs and that stereotypical image. But yeah, so I have your Healing PCOS book here. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
And I really like how in your book you talk about mindset as being the first step in anyone's, you know, journey and in the 21-day plan. Can you explain? Like, I agree that mindset is like huge, and it should be like the first step. But can you explain to our listeners why mindset is so important and why you talk about it first as the first step to anyone's kind of journey?
Well, I know that when I was in my really low place that I described, I was in sort of a why me pity party state. You know, why does this have to happen to me? I know at the time, a lot of the women in my neighborhood were getting pregnant, and I think that's the hardest thing when you're having infertility issues, to see friends and family members, you know, sharing their exciting news, and you're excited about it, but you're just, it's so hard not to feel like a victim. And I was definitely in that place of feeling like a victim. And when you're a victim, it's extremely paralyzing. You know, you blame everyone and everything on your situation, and it leaves you with the inability to really do anything. And I had to shift out of that victim mindset to a more empowered mindset, and realizing that I did have control over my situation. And it really, for me, my healing journey began with making that shift, that I no longer have to, have PCOS, that this idea of I have PCOS, but PCOS doesn't have me was a real powerful shift. So moving out of that victim mentality to one of an empowering diva was just a huge step. And in the book, it's really the first chapter, Think Like a Diva, because I truly believe unless you start thinking like that you can take control, that it's not your fault that you have PCOS, that you really can't move forward to make those positive choices that you have to make for yourself in terms of, making sure that you're getting lots of nutrient-rich food, making sure that you're moving your body, that you're getting enough sleep, that you're taking your supplements or medication, and doing it from a place of really respecting yourself and loving yourself is so important. I know for a lot of us, we're still stuck in this paradigm of kind of punishing ourselves with exercise. This whole idea of I had a donut for breakfast, so now I need to go on a 3-mile run to X out the damage that did. And that's not I was certainly had that approach to my life, but it wasn't until I shifted out of that victim, self-punishment, self-hate to self-love, and feeling empowered that I didn't I started making strides in my health.
That's interesting. And I can relate to that because I feel like I was, had disordered eating and an eating disorder. And I used to punish myself all the time. If I would eat something, I would go to the gym and try and burn it off, or I just feel so guilty for eating something that wasn't quote unquote healthy, or just when you're out and you're with your friends and you have something that isn't healthy, and you just kind of punish yourself. And it's stuff like that where if you're always on that road, you're never really gonna. You need to be able to develop a healthy relationship with food so you can enjoy your life, and so things don't feel like it's like boring and like a stressful. Like life should be easy and enjoyable, and having that kind of mindset and relationship with food just makes stuff so not fun and really depressing, and just life's just really not so good. I remember when I was going through my eating disorder, I went through it for like 5 years, and I was just, every day was just so bad. Like you didn't want to get up because you would just think about food all the time. It's weird because you're like, you don't want to eat, but all you can do is think about food. And it's just like, it's just so frustrating. But yeah.
No, I totally understand that because that was the relationship I had too. And I found that it wasn't until I truly allowed myself to experience pleasure and really enjoy it that, you can have something truly pleasurable that you enjoy, and being mindful in the moment and allowing yourself to do that. It sort of takes the power away from the food as soon as you allow it into your life, and then you just don't crave it as much anymore. I've found. The other thing that I wanted to say too about mindset is, for a lot of women with PCOS, they feel like PCOS has robbed them of their femininity. And I think that there's a lot of messages out there that of PCOS, like fight PCOS, conquer PCOS, these ideas that are really ripe with masculine energy, right? Fighting, conquering, battling. So I had to realize that I wanted to partner with my body. I didn't want to fight the PCOS. I needed to realize that PCOS was a message my body was sort of sending to me, that there were things that were out of balance in my life. And at the time when I was really struggling, there were, my emotional health, my physical health, my spiritual health, all of that was sort of out of balance. And PCOS was just a wake-up call. And it wasn't really anything to fight against. It was something to work with in order to bring things back into balance and to sort of embrace my feminine side. And that's when the healing came in. So if you're listening and you're kind of framing your whole PCOS experience in that masculine way, try switching it and think of it as a wake-up call that you need to bring your life into more balance.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree with that, because I see that a lot. It's like fighting PCOS, and I just feel like you said, the symptoms we're experiencing, PCOS is like a wake-up call. It's messages sent by your body crying for help. It's like sending these messages, these signs, these symptoms are like an indication that it needs, some support, some nourishment, some care. And instead of fighting it, because when we think of fighting, we end up, over-exercising and restricting, and all this stuff is just adding even more stress and causing even more havoc.
Exactly.
When all we need to do is like take a step back and really start feeding and fueling and respecting and taking care of it. And then that's when you start to notice, your hormones balancing and the symptoms reversing. So I totally agree. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think it is really important aspect of like mindset as well. And it's something that needs to be done as soon as you're diagnosed. I think that part is so important, moving away from that fighting mindset and not feeling like that victim either. So I wanted to ask how can someone, like, in your book you have like good phrases of how to change your mindset and speak to yourself in a positive way. So what's like something that someone could do right now to start making that change to their mindset? Like, what's one tip you can give?
Well, I think what's really powerful is mirror affirmations. I don't know if you've ever tried that before, but really just standing in front of the mirror and just looking at yourself and giving yourself some phrase of acceptance, whether, find something to love about yourself. And whether it's, you've got beautiful eyes, or, a lovely complexion, or, you've got, pretty dark hair, or you're just, have a loving glow about you. I mean, you have to find something that you love about yourself and say it out loud to yourself in the mirror. Because I think we're so good at beating ourselves up, right? We're great at looking at ourselves in the mirror and seeing the bumps and the lumps and all of the undesirable things that we think that we're not enough. But if we can start feeding into our psyche that there's some part of us that is enough, and then let that propel you forward. But doing that in the mirror, there's something very powerful about that. And I guess that's where I would start.
Amazing. I really like that. And I definitely agree that having those affirmations is important. And I feel like when you say that, everyone's like, but that's just so hard. I don't know anything I can see on my body or about myself that I like. And I think that's where, that's when people say that, it's really sad. And I feel like that's so important to like start doing, even if you just find one thing just to say every day, every morning, and every night, like before you go to bed, just say that. Or even just like having a journal and stuff like that, or just journaling. I think, and being grateful for what you have, I think that starts to uplift you a bit more. Because I remember when I was being so negative when I was diagnosed, I was just like, this is going to be my life forever. I should just give up. My period's not coming, and all this kind of stuff. I just feel I'm not confident, all this stuff. And I just feel like when I started saying positive things, you just feel so much better. Like when you say that positive phrase, or just it enlightens you, makes you feel it, makes you feel more positive. So I feel like once you just say that one thing, that positive thing, everything else just kind of like changes, and you just feel so much better. The power of just saying a positive thing is incredible.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. Like if you can't think of anything, then you need to ask a trusted friend.
Mm.
Ask them to tell you what is beautiful about you inside and out. And then, maybe start with from there. Um, and I also think you brought up a good point about gratitude. And gratitude is such a huge game changer when we focus on not enough and what we don't have, or we can focus on what we have. And there's a quote out there that I don't know who to attribute it to, but what it's basically, whether you focus on the what you don't have or focus on what you have, that's going to expand. So the more you focus on gratitude and the good in your life, the more that the good in your life is going to expand. So you're absolutely right. Gratitude is a huge game changer.
Absolutely. Definitely it's very important. And I feel like when you're always thinking negatively, it clouds your ability to think of solutions, which is so important when you're trying to overcome, and find solutions for what you need to do to make changes in your life. I feel like once you have that positivity, you can think of solutions, see more clearly, and stay on course and be more motivated and excited about every day and every improvement you make. So definitely having that power of just mindset is like a deal breaker. It's so important. So yeah, I'm glad we touched on that, and I'm glad it's the first chapter in your book. I feel like it's really important. And then obviously this kind of another big thing, like a foundation as well, is diet. So can you talk to us about the importance of diet for PCOS? And obviously we discussed briefly in the intro, we're talking about how with insulin resistance, how we're experiencing these symptoms after you eat a meal and you feel a bit fatigued and drained of energy and stuff like that. So can you explain the importance of finding a way of eating that suits you, and if there was anything that you followed when you were just diagnosed, and if that changed to what you're doing currently, and just share some tips?
Well, I think you said something that's really key, finding the diet that suits you. Because at the end of the day, it has to be something that's really sustainable. Because as you mentioned, we have PCOS for a lifetime, and we can manage it really successfully over a lifetime. But that's going to require, eating well. And eating well is going to look different for each of us. And I think for me, I remember early on thinking that I needed to be on like an Atkins type diet or a South Beach diet. So I was eating a lot of low carb things, but a lot of these low carb things were filled with artificial sweeteners. I mean, I was eating like sugar-free Jello and sugar-free chocolates, but they were, filled with these sugar alcohols and artificial sweeteners. And I was really more focused on the low carb rather than the nutrient rich. And over time, I realized that what my body really needed was a lot of nutrient rich anti-inflammatory foods to feel good. And for me, as my insulin resistance improved, I found that I could eat a wider variety of foods, meaning I could eat more grains. I'm still fairly gluten-free and dairy-free because for me, I think those things do cause inflammation in my body. But I can have more carbohydrates now. So, things like rice or sweet potatoes or quinoa or, even gluten-free bread or, that kind of thing. But for some women, that's when they're really struggling and really have a lot of insulin resistance, too many of those carbohydrates still are too much, even if they are gluten-free. But I think for all women with PCOS, we need to have lots of vegetables, lots of greens, lots of nutrient-rich seeds and nuts, high-quality fat like avocado and grass-fed butter. And, even though butter is dairy, it's primarily a fat. So I still do use grass-fed butter. And making sure that you have clean sources of protein is important. I think I will honestly say that have not met a lot of women with PCOS who have successfully managed on a vegan diet or vegetarian over the long haul. I do think that for hormonal balance, that most women with PCOS are going to need some animal protein. So that's still probably my recommendation. But things like eggs, like cage-free eggs, cold water fish, here where I live, it's things like cod and haddock, but it all depends on where you live. But organic chicken and grass-fed beef and like heritage pork, I think that's important to make sure that you're limiting your toxic load in terms of animal protein. And I talk about in my book I call it the Diva dinner plate, and making sure, it's basically your balanced plate approach, but using your plate. So half of your plate is filled with leafy green vegetables, or kind of like a water-based, like cruciferous vegetable. And then a quarter of your plate would be your protein. A quarter of your plate would be your gluten-free grain or your root vegetable. And then on top of that would be like a generous dollop of fat. I think the half a plate of veggies is non-negotiable, but then you can kind of figure out for yourself, like what percentage of protein versus, those grains or root vegetables, and how much fat you need. But for me, that way of eating has sustained me over these 10 years. And I do I call them mindful indulgences. I know as we're recording, there's a holiday coming up, and I've already planned for my dessert for that holiday. I'm making a key lime pie, a dairy-free key lime pie for my family, and I'm looking forward to that. And I will have a piece of it and really enjoy it and not feel guilty about it. I think it's fine to have an indulgence, maybe a glass of wine with dinner, but I'm going to truly enjoy it and not beat myself up about it. I think a woman with PCOS, her plan has to allow these pleasurable indulgences as well.
Totally agree with that. I feel like it's important to have that balance where you allow yourself to eat, those enjoyable foods.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to ask this question because I feel like it's quite common in the community and just in general. I feel like, and I want to kind of get your opinion to see what you would say to the listeners. The idea of, when people's like cheat days or having a cheat meal, what's your kind of stance on it? Do you just believe that there should be that balance where you can just eat every day or here and there what you want, rather than like a whole day where you just go all out and just have everything that's processed and like kind of
yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that my mindset, I've really have reframed myself to realize that, I love my body enough that I don't want to put the junk in it, like the real junky junk. I won't go to McDonald's or fast food because I just don't want to put that in my body. But if I actually, one of my favorite things is like chocolate covered almonds. I probably have a few of those every day, or a piece of chocolate every day. Something that I really brings me pleasure. I enjoy it. It feels like a little indulgence every day, and it satisfies me so that I don't feel like I need to go reach for a kind of a junky candy bar or whatever. So I think, because of my relationship with my body, and now the way that I view food as a form of nourishing and healing my body, like having a cheat day like that just doesn't hold the same appeal that it may have once held. And plus, I just don't like the way I feel after that. And,
Mhm.
I think nothing tastes as good as feeling good feels, truly. I don't want to be sacked out on the couch again in a low sugar food coma because I've eaten half a pizza. I mean, I just don't want to do it. But I do, like that being said, I think it's fine to plan for something really delicious that you enjoy, as long as it makes you feel okay, I guess, afterwards.
Definitely. And I agree that it's good to have, like, you have your chocolate covered almonds, like, which has got kind of like some chocolate, some kind of treat. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's good to have that like every day and not feel like, because when you tell your brain like you can't have this, then you end up craving it even more. So allowing yourself
Absolutely.
to have it whenever you want, and it's not like off limits, it's not like a bad food, then your brain ends up saying like, I can have it if I want to, I can have it today, I can have it for breakfast, I can have it tomorrow. It's like, it's not like this amazing thing that, oh my gosh, I can't, it's not it's not allowed, it's off limits. So I think that's important for women to just keep that in mind, that you're allowed to have what you want. um it's not like things are off limit. And it's like you said, if you eat something that doesn't really sit well with you and you feel fatigued after, like eating something really processed like McDonald's, and after you eat that you just feel like, why did I even eat this? You just feel
I
so like
know.
in a coma of like all this sugar rush and like there's all that fat and stuff. Well, it's pretty bad, but anyway, I feel like but yeah, I'm glad like you touched on the vegetarian and vegan diet, how everyone kind of tries these different diets when they've just been diagnosed. And I feel like it's very common for women to go through the low carb and then the keto and all this kind of stuff until like all this stuff works in the short term and then eventually doesn't really do anything. And then you're reintroducing carbs and focusing more on the nourishment, um, and eating to fuel your body and provide it with nutrients, which is important. I feel like everyone kind of goes through that process. But yeah, I think following an anti-inflammatory diet is really important, as the majority of women suffer from some kind of chronic inflammation. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure you're eating, omega-3s and, cruciferous vegetables is really important to help lower that inflammation, to help with symptoms. Is there anything else you want to touch on with regards to diet? And there's a lot of recipes in your book as well, which are really cool and interesting, and want to like give them a go and stuff. But is there anything else you might want to touch on, a bit of advice or a final little tip?
Well, I do think that you bring up a good point about, these different diets, and some of them really work well in the short term. I think for a lot of women with PCOS, they have a lot of success on a keto type diet, but I think and that's fine, maybe for a month or two to, lose some weight if they're struggling with fertility. But I think over the course of the long term, it's very hard to stick to those diets that are so restrictive. You need to find something that works with life, because you can only sustain something like that for so long. The other thing that I was going to say too is, I think it's helpful for women to experiment with, I'm going to say the word intermittent fasting. I don't real, I, I'm not talking about, not eating all day or for days at end. I'm just talking about eating within a certain window of time. And for most women with PCOS, I think you can work towards, eating within a 12-hour window and fasting for 12 hours. So that would look like, at 7 o'clock at night, the kitchen's closed and you don't eat. You can certainly have herbal teas or, water, but then not eating again until 7. That act of being able to kind of detoxify and digest overnight, your body's sleeping and it can work to do all those things that it needs to do while you're sleeping, rather than digesting food that you ate at, midnight before you went to bed. I think that has been very helpful in my journey. You can, as your insulin sensitivity increases, you can extend that a little bit to a point where maybe you're doing like eating within an 8-hour window. But you only do that if you feel like your blood sugar is really stable. But you could start at 12 hours and slowly work your way up to like a 16-hour, maybe just a couple days a week. But I think that can make a huge difference for a lot of women in terms of their insulin resistance and just how they feel.
Yeah, definitely. I think intermittent fasting, while making sure that your blood sugar level is like healthy and not like all over the place, it can potentially help some women with PCOS. So it's a good point. And moving on to like another kind of big part of diet and nutrition is supplements. And I know you touch on supplements in your book. What would be, I don't know, the top PCOS supplements? I know this is like very personalized and unique to the individual, but I guess in general, what would the fundamental or key ones be?
Well, first off, I'm not a big advocate of starting off taking a gazillion supplements because, like diet, there isn't a one size fits all approach. And I think what happens is a lot of women go on to the internet and different PCOS groups, and they see different women having luck with different supplements. So they end up taking like a whole lot of stuff that they may not even really need, and it's really expensive to maintain. So I really think that women with PCOS should just start off with taking a good multivitamin that has methylated B12 in it. A lot of women are on metformin, and B12 gets depleted when you're on metformin. And B12 also, if you have low B12, then you mimic a lot of PCOS symptoms like fatigue and infertility. So making sure that you get also a supplement, a multivitamin that has folate instead of folic acid. And it's just a good all-around multi, and of course a prenatal if you're trying to conceive, pregnant, or nursing. And then I think that most women with PCOS benefit from being on fish oil, high quality fish oil with EPA and DHA. We don't really convert plant-based omega-3s very well. So a fish oil helps on so many different levels. It helps with insulin resistance, it helps with androgens, helps with cholesterol, it helps with mood. And then making sure your vitamin D is optimized. Most women with PCOS tend to have vitamin D issues, so asking your doctor to test your D, and then you're going to need to supplement accordingly to get that into an optimal range, and you can work with your doctor on that. I like a vitamin D supplement that has vitamins K1 and K2. I think it helps with absorption. So those are really the three that I think every woman with PCOS should be on consistently. From there, you kind of want to look at what symptoms that you're dealing with, and you can kind of add things on. But when you add supplements to that regimen, I think you should just kind of do them one at a time and see how they make you feel. A lot of women are taking inositols, and that can help on lots of different levels. The supplement that was sort of first to market was that was a combination inositol, myo, and dechirosibositol. I don't know if you've heard of that. A lot of women are on that, but for some women, it doesn't work for them. It causes GI issues, or it really dysregulates cycle. So, that's something that you don't want to add with a bunch of other supplements, because then you don't really know what's causing the problems and what's not. And from there, some other supplements that, can be helpful are things like N-acetylcysteine, especially if you're dealing with fatty liver issues. Resveratrol, there's been some good studies with resveratrol. Magnesium, women with PCOS tend to be low in magnesium. Melatonin, and there's just so many different supplements out there that you could try. But I think it's good to just sort of get those 3 vitamin D, a good multi with folate and B12 and a fish oil.
Definitely agree with all those supplements, and I feel definitely magnesium's one of the important ones as well, because I feel like when we're going through stress,
Mm-hmm.
we get depleted of magnesium, so it's important to supplement that back, whether it's through a supplement or through food. But like you were saying, I think it's important to always use food, like change your diet, try and get as much nutrients from food before you kind of use supplements, because obviously you can't out supplement a bad diet. And
I was just going to say that, and I think a lot of women do approach it that way. Like, what can I take? What's the magic pill? But because, like, for instance, magnesium, raw cacao powder is a great source of magnesium. You can put that in your morning smoothie, and that might be enough for you.
mm,
You
yeah,
know.
so I feel like it's really important to get test your like levels before going to the store and just you know just filling your basket with every kind of supplement someone
Mm-hmm.
says to be beneficial, because those supplements you mentioned, like omega-3, vitamin B12, those are really important. And I feel like after that kind of stage, you have to get more personalized, because, like you said, with a Vacitol, an Inositol, it might not be for you. It might not be helping your specific hormonal imbalance. So
Mm-hmm.
always getting tested first, because then also I feel like it's important to know what your dose is as well, because I feel like you might be taking too much or not enough, so then you're kind of like it's not really doing anything. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's important. And another thing is with getting all these supplements and not really knowing and not testing is you could have like gut problems, because that's like another big thing with
Mm-hmm.
women with PCOS. Like we don't have enough of like there's like an imbalance of gut bacteria, so you might
Mm-hmm.
not even be absorbing all those nutrients you've been putting in, and you're
Mm-hmm.
just without like £50 worth of supplements or £100 worth of supplements have just gone to waste. So it's always important to, before jumping and just buy every supplement under the sun, is to check everything, check which supplements you need, which nutrients you might be deficient in, if there's any gut problems, and then really do your research and find a high quality supplement. It's not filled with like fillers and stuff like that, because then it's like another kind of wasting your money. So finding high quality ones, and like you mentioned with vitamin D, finding one with a vitamin K to make sure it increases the absorption is really important as well. But yeah, I definitely agree with the supplements you said. And then, like we said, going more deeper with the doctor, finding out more personalized supplements is important. Awesome. So I feel like we can move on to like another kind of key component, which would be exercise. And I'm a personal trainer, so I feel like I want to get your kind of stance on this and your opinion, and maybe like what you did and what you currently do. So is there a best exercise for PCOS, and how can a woman with PCOS find out the best exercise for her PCOS?
Well, honestly, I think the best exercise is the one that you enjoy and that you do, and you like to do it, and it's sustainable. Because it's important to move our bodies, but what I enjoy might not be what you enjoy. And if you're not going to do it, then it's just not going to work, right? I know that when I was younger and struggling with my health, I was exercising from that place of self-punishment. So I used to just literally run myself ragged. Um, I didn't derive much pleasure out of it. I just did it because I'm kind of a type A perfectionist, and I ran to the point where I had shin splints and had to start walking. And what really surprised me is that when I switched to walking, the weight started coming off. I think that I had really stressed out my adrenals. And I think I don't know if you notice this with women with PCOS, but a lot of us have adrenal issues. And if we really push ourselves with exercise, then we end up exhausted. And we end up, I think, doing more damage than not. So I find for a lot of women, it's been my experience that walking And mind body exercises like yoga. I like bar. I joined a studio 4 years ago called Pure Bar, and I love that. It really works for me. Um, I think lifting weights can be really beneficial. I think women with PCOS, we have that extra testosterone, and we can build muscle, and muscle helps with our blood sugar control. So, working out with weights, it can be very helpful too. But I have found that women who do a lot of single exertion exercise, like long distance running, signing up for a half marathon or something like that, and then training, doing sort of the single exertion running, it sort of wreaks havoc on your hormones. So the high intensity intervals, like exercising with intervals, is a more beneficial exercise, I think, for women with PCOS to kind of help their hormones. So I don't know, are you seeing the same thing with the women that you're working with?
Yeah, I agree that if you're feeling fatigued after exercising, then that's just kind of sign that there's something that needs to change, because you shouldn't be just like feel like you have to take a nap after a workout. You should be feeling more energized. All the endorphins flowing. You should have be more pumped to go continue your day and like be more positive. And so yeah, I've noticed that as when I feel like it's important to find an exercise that is personalized and suited to your current situation, your hormone imbalance. So if it's something more like adrenal PCOS, then going for more like low intensity, and like weightlifting as well is good. But I feel like with insulin resistance, there's research to show that high intensity interval training can be good to help activate insulin and get that the sugar into the muscles. So I feel like it really depends. It's about honoring your own hormonal imbalance. So this is where like you have to really get to that root cause and get those tests done before it's like before you start changing your diet and change your exercise. You really need to know what's the problem so you can customize your whole lifestyle towards it. And I think, like what you said, it's important to find something you enjoy so you can do it consistently, because at the end of the day, consistency is key. You can't, results come when you're doing something regularly. So if you don't enjoy the exercise you're doing, if you're just doing what your friends are doing, or if you're doing the new trend, or I don't know, like whatever's new, and you hate it, then you cannot expect to get results, because you don't like it, so you're going to get stressed because you don't like it, and all this kind of cortisol is increasing. So I feel like finding what you enjoy is the most important, and then just doing it, and just and I feel like women should not be afraid of lifting weights, because we do have more testosterone, so that can help build muscle. But research shows that every 10% increase in muscle mass results in a 11% relative reduction in insulin resistance. So that's like a good sign. So no one should be afraid of lifting weights. And as women are scared of like becoming bulky and looking like men, not really going to happen. You have to put so many hours, and just like it's not really going to happen. You might build some muscle, but it's nothing that's going to be like, oh my gosh, this is not a good sign. So yeah, women shouldn't be afraid of that. And I feel like the final kind of thing I want to say is just like finding something you really enjoy, and not feeling like it's a punishment, not exercising as a way to punish your body for what you ate, or that fighting mindset that we spoke about before. But I feel like that's the most important thing in my opinion.
And I also think you need to know like your personality. Do you like to go into a studio or a gym and work out with other people? I definitely am very competitive, and being in a class with other people definitely keeps me going and keeps me honest. I really do not like working out at home by myself, but I know other people that I am friends with, they love like the Peloton bike, where you do your at-home workout, and they love being at home and they hate the gym. So I think that's another thing to consider as well, is where you're doing the exercise, and do you like to be in community, or do you like to be by yourself?
Yeah, that's actually quite true. I feel like because I feel like when I went and started yoga for the first time, I think it was like last year, I was super nervous. I was like, oh my God, people are going to be like watching me and I'm going to be really bad, because I'm used to just going to the gym and being on my own, just lifting weights and just going in and getting out. I'm not really like talk to people and like be around people. But yeah, I feel like it's quite good to have a group of people and being part of that kind of community, going to the studio and just seeing people and people motivate you and you try to be better, because you're not like in competition with someone else.
Right. It's
you know
more
what
with
I mean?
yourself, but you don't want to let your friends down because you
Yeah.
didn't do the last set of reps, I guess.
Exactly. So I feel like that's a good point. I feel keep that in mind. That's quite good. So what's one thing you wish you knew when you were just diagnosed? If you can go back, what was that one thing that you know now that you wish you knew then?
Oh gosh, I mentioned about having hope. I know that when I was shortly after I was diagnosed, I remember going to the doctor, and I was 17, and the doctor said to me, "We'll have to jump through hoops one day to get you pregnant." And I know that caused me for many, many years a lot of anxiety. Gosh, as I'm talking about it, I could feel myself getting emotional about it. And now, I have 3 healthy kids, and if I had known then not to stress and worry about it so much, and I could tell you over the years I've talked to women who have been told the same thing, and they really shut down the possibilities of having children, and it didn't become a reality for them. So I think that's what my message would be, is if you have been told that you won't have children because of PCOS, do not take that as your truth, because most women, although we might need some extra help, if PCOS is the reason doctors are telling you you're not going to have children, that's probably not true. There is a lot of hope for you. So I think that's what I wish I had known.
That's great. I feel like women can relate to that, and I feel that's like, I mean, when I was diagnosed, he said, my doctor said, here's the birth control pill, and then when you're ready to have kids, like, we can talk about what you need to do. And I feel like that's just, I feel like it's not a good answer the doctor should be giving you, and I feel like it kind of like makes you feel like that victim again, like you have to constantly be waiting. And yeah, I feel like it's something that needs to be changed. And I think having the hope is really important. As soon as you've just been diagnosed, don't feel like that victim. Don't feel like, all these symptoms are reversible. Infertility, yes, like one of the leading causes of infertility. But like you said, it's possible. So many success stories out there. So I feel like women have to stay hopeful, stay positive, and yeah, I feel like it's a great final thing to wrap up. But yeah, so how can our listeners connect with you? What social media platforms can they find you on? Where can they find the book, stuff like that? Let listeners know.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's been a lot of fun chatting. So I'm at PCOSDiva.com, and I have lots of resources on my website: a supplement guide, a labs guide, a smoothie guide, and you can find those all there. I'm also very active on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called the PCOS Diva private community that you can join if you are craving community with like-minded women that don't feel, that want to shift from being victims. And then I'm also on Instagram and Pinterest. I have lots of Pinterest boards with recipes and different ideas for you as well. And then my book, Healing PCOS, is available on Kindle, Audible. It's your hardcover or softcover, and you can get that where books are sold.
Awesome. Highly recommend checking Amy out, PCOSDiva.com, and purchasing Healing PCOS. Definitely a great book, highly recommend. It's just got everything in here, so for everyone that wants to just see it on that's watching through video, definitely check that out, purchase it. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on the podcast, share your knowledge, raise more awareness, and just, thank you so much. And I appreciate taking the time out of the day. It's an honor speaking to you, so thank you so much.
Oh, it's really been a joy. Thank you.